Alright, so when you get your Barra mid-mount alternator bracket kit, this is what you're going to get inside of it when you lay it out. Now it's pretty easy. If you just want to start by having a look at the rear support and the two M10 bolts that go with that, you can just put the washers on it, and then basically that will go in there and bolt to the block. Then what you've got your two longer M10 cap screws, which are going to be used in the corners of this bracket, and that's going to mount the alternator. Then you've got your M8 bolts, which are quite simple. They're going to go into the bracket. These two M8 bolts are going to go into the engine block, and I highly recommend, with any bolts going into engine blocks or going into anything else, just to use a little bit of thread lubricant, like the ARP thread lubricant, moly grease, or anything that's going to be corrosion resistant. And then you've got your M8 smaller bolts, which are 30mm long. Now these are going to go through the flange where the power steering used to be, and then we've got little nuts for the back of that. So we'll go over to the engine now and put it all on. Okay, so for the rear support, it's quite simple to install. All you're going to do is use your little bit of thread lube. Now you're going to whack on this bracket here to these two holes in the back of the Barra block. Now start by just leaving them loose and then tighten them up 90% of the way. It's quite important not to tighten this bracket all the way up. Leave the bracket a little bit loose, because this bracket here has a thread, and through the front when you bolt on the alternator, if this is loose, it's going to allow the bolt to go in nice and easy, even if it is on an angle. And then once the alternator bracket's in and everything's lined up, we can tighten these bolts up here, which is then going to lock in the alternator nice and tight. Okay, at this stage we're going to start to work on the front bracket. This is nice and easy. Once again, get your thread lubricant onto the bolts just to ensure that nothing seizes up later down the track. And we're going to use these two holes here to mount the front of the bracket. We'll get these in. And just gently, 90% of the way, do them up. Still leave the bracket a little bit loose at this stage. Leaving it loose is just going to mean that no brackets are too tight and cause issues down the track. So then we're going to get the two shorter M8 bolts. Yet again, more thread lubricant, pass them through these holes here. In the kit that you have, you'll have nylock nuts on these bolts. You won't have standard hex nuts. So we're just going to put our little washer on. And our nut. Quite easy. Now at this stage, if you want to go and tighten up the first two bolts, by all means. Recommend doing these up by hand, not with an impact gun. Okay, now with this loose, we can start to get ready to place the alternator in. So to do that, we're going to get the longer of the two M10 bolts. It's going to go up the top and it's going to bolt straight into this rear support. So get your LS alternator. Now, what you're going to also notice with this alternator bracket is that some LS alternators will have a different back spacing on the pulley. Now we've allowed for this with our alternator bracket, and we haven't made it too tight in between here. We've given it room, and we've given you two extra 2mm shims, and these shims can either go in front of the alternator bracket or at the back of the alternator bracket. And this gives you the freedom to either bring the alternator forward or push it back slightly. And this is going to help you with getting your belts aligned. By simply putting the alternator bracket straight onto the front plate here is not going to ensure that the alternator is going to be true to the belt track. You're going to have a look and just double check that your alternator and manufacturing case is going to be true to the belts. So for this, you'll use your 2mm shim, place it at the front, place the alternator in, then you can start to do it up, which is nice and easy. Same goes with the bottom. Get your bolt, get your shim, place it on, place it in. At the back of the bottom bolt here, you will have a little washer and a nylock nut. Those go on nice and easy. Then we start to work the top bolt in. Get that nice and tight. Same goes with the bottom, which is nice and tight now. And the last thing to tighten up is just those first two bolts that we did, which is the rear support bracket bolts. You can get those by just reaching straight around the back now and just give them their final tighten up. If you have your exhaust on, this will be a tight access that you should be able to get in there. Then once that's tight, everything's good to go, and you've got the most rock solid LS alternator bracket out there. If you have the eccentric idler pulley, it's quite easy to install, and it's going to use this M10 provision here. To be honest, you can use any M10 idler pulley you like. You can be creative, you can make your own belt combinations. This is going to give you the flexibility to run various different belt patterns you like. You can run it around, you can come down to the alternator delete plate, you can come up, you can come down, you know, you can run alternator only. There's many different ways to do it. If you're not sure how to use this tensioner pulley, basically while they're loose, you can slip the belt through, and then you can use the idler and these two holes to tighten the belts. Quite easy.